Welcome to Corporate Health and Well-Being for Women. This session will begin soon.
Welcome to our third panel in Driving Corporate Purpose. This panel, Corporate Health and Well-Being for Women, we will talk about how companies are managing the health and well-being of all employees and the critical role this plays in accelerating leadership. We are hearing from women leaders themselves. And to kick this off, we have Dr. Deb Clary of Humana. Humana is a corporate sponsor, and Dr. Deb Clary is an advisory council co-chair. Deb, take it away.
Thank you, Gwen. I really appreciate that. Last month alone, there were 4 million Americans that quit their jobs. That's if all of LA doesn't show up to work tomorrow. Now, of course, that includes men and women. We understand that the Great Resignation is really disproportionate towards women. Now, we call it the Great Resignation in the media. I think a better word for that could be the Great Awakening, where women are awakening to what is important to them, what do they want in a corporation, and what is the culture that's going to be most meaningful for them. And today we have 3 women that are going to help us think through that and leave with some practical ideas and tools that will allow each of us to change the cultures in which we find ourselves in. So to start us off, we have Connie Mcgee. She is Vice President of Health Tech at Dell Incorporated. We have Zita Smith, who is CEO of Senior North America for Sodexo. And then we have Dr. Taya Scott, who is Chief Innovation Officer at Morehouse School of Medicine. Connie, would you be willing to share a little bit about your background to get us started?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Deb. I'm honored to be here, first of all, with WBC on this panel and with 2 of these dynamic women and yourself. So thank you for including me. I think we've got a lot of great conversation ahead of us. So I'll just go ahead and jump in a little bit. Connie Mcgee, I'm based out of Nashville, Tennessee. I've worked in healthcare technology for the last 30 years. Started my career out with some of the top corporate healthcare tech companies, such as Dell Technologies. That's how I started my career. Then KPMG. I've also worked with Intel Corporation, Microsoft, and now I'm back with Dell Technologies, which I hope to end my career on where I started. So I'm excited about the things that I'm doing right now with the global alliances at Dell. If you think about where we've been, especially as women in the workforce, and I think what you talked about, Deb, having that many women exit the workforce, that is so impactful when you think about employers right now, everything we've done to come through the pandemic. And now we're still dealing with the women exiting the workforce. They started out, of course, as the Great Resignation. I do like the Great Awakening, as you speak about. And I know from a corporate standpoint, we were always recruiting women into STEM careers and bringing them into healthcare technology. Now we've had this mass exodus and we look and go, what happened? How do we get those women to come back? And I think we're at a point now we would have to absolutely reset the numbers. And I don't know if we can catch up with everybody that's exited. And you look at why they exited, and I think that's going to be a lot of the good conversations we're going to have today. One of the things that I did find intriguing is when we think about the Great Awakening, we look at women and the challenges they've had with, trying to balance pre-COVID of the work-life balance. Then we came into the pandemic, and during COVID, they were impacted by who's going to stay at home and take care of the kids. All of a sudden daycares closed down, schools closed down. That was very impactful, and one of the reasons a lot of the women exited. When I think about my journey and you know, how I grew up with putting my children in daycare. I never had to address anything like this pandemic before, 30 years in a career. All of a sudden, I saw the women that worked for me and the challenges they had to try and manage. They were quitting and giving up their jobs to stay at home and take care of the family and take care of the kids, continue that education in the home as well. But for, you know, a lot of them, they just could not balance it, because you think about the well-being, the mental well-being that we also encountered. Then you look at the retention and the workforce and how that shifted and how that changed. I know for me, I became a very big mentor, and also looking after my employees and my direct reports that work for me during the pandemic. I don't think a lot of people realize the toll that took on us as individual leaders also, because we were so concerned about what was going on with our people, how we were going to help them. But it was taking a toll on us as well. And after 30 years, I stepped out of the workforce last January, because as a leader, there was a lot of pressure on. And then you also saw the workplace itself pivoting, having to shift what they were doing. And then we had, you know, we were giving more flexibility to our employees, but yet we still had to take on that role of our responsibilities as leaders to the company and hitting the numbers and the revenues. So, you know, I took a step back. And then the next thing you knew, it was the Great Resignation. And I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. I'm part of that. But, you know, I think it was an insight also for me to go, it was beginning to take a toll on me and my well-being. And I thought it's time to step away and decide what I wanted to do. And after a year, I would not take anything for that. But after a year, I now step back in. And I was very selective in where I went to work, what the culture was, and who I was going to be working with. So that's a little bit about my journey, and I'll turn it over to some of the other ladies.
All right. Thank you, Connie, so much. And, you know, as you were talking about taking a step back, I actually thought about you took a step out, which
Yeah.
so many women are doing right now. And thank goodness
That's
you took
true.
a step back in. You regrouped, you thought was what was really important to you. So we're so
Yeah.
glad that you took a step back in. So
Yes.
let's go to, thank you. Let's go to Zita and tell us a little bit about your story.
Connie, it sounds like you took a step forward also.
You know
I
what?
love
That's
it.
true.
I love it.
Yeah,
For
yeah,
well-being, you are so right.
for sure. So good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Zita Smith, I'm the CEO with Sodexo, and I am in charge of the seniors division. And I joined Sodexo in 2020, January 2020. I went live in my role March 6th of March 2020. And what happened? March 13th, we were in lockdown. So my role predominantly has been within the pandemic. And so leadership, crisis leadership, and all of those things over the last couple of years, you know, I've learned a lot about what really is needed, certainly during a crisis, that being the pandemic. But also I brought with me the experience of my previous 30 years. And first off, to admit it's been 30 years, but that's a whole nother conversation. So my first role out of college, I'm based in Maryland now, was with ExxonMobil, and I was there for 15 years. Gas and oil industry, male dominated, white male dominated. My first role was as a franchise marketing representative. I had 26 service stations in North Jersey, and I was the first Black woman rep for a 26 store or 26 station territory. And I just want you to imagine my 22-year-old self right out of college walking onto a service station lot, and the franchisees were average age of 55, white male, and had been in the business for 20, 30 years. So my welcome was, I was clearly identified as a Black person and as a woman, and how do you function through that? How do you provide credibility, et cetera? And I figured that out pretty quickly of just communication, instilling trust, getting the job done, and was lucky enough to continue to progress through multiple jobs within the company, and then proceeded to start spreading my wings after 15 years and went to Starbucks Coffee Company. I moved around quite a bit during that time, each with a ladder progression, which was a wonderful opportunity for development. And I landed in Seattle at the tail end of my tenure with Starbucks, and realized then that the West Coast, the Pacific Northwest, and for those who love it, good for you. I really struggled with being away from family and friends and the weather and all of those things. And so Connie's talking about well-being, Dr. Deborah's talking about well-being. And at the time, I couldn't define what it was, but it was my well-being. And I was there for 3 years. I had taken that role for a ladder of progression, a great opportunity. We moved our family. We had just adopted a son. We all kind of, flew across the country from Boston area and settled in. And it was tough. And so at the end of the day, I too took a sidestep out of the workforce and landed at Sodexo about a year later. But during that time, it was about kind of centering myself on what do I really want to do? I don't want my career to get in the way of life. And then, so we moved, which was wonderful. We moved near my parents, near friends. We're back in Maryland. I went to the University of Maryland. It's been fantastic. 6 months later, pandemic. The good news in all of that, though, is I was where I wanted to be personally. I was grounded. I had my family. I had my friends. So whatever was coming my way with the new role and in the pandemic, my well-being was intact. But I give credit to just taking a step back before the pandemic, getting myself grounded to be able to set myself up on how I would deal with that. With my new role and in the job. And I'll just say before passing it on to Taya that, just a credit to everyone who continues to strive to be their best, do their best in the midst of this pandemic. In the senior living community, it's 24 hours a day, it's 7 days a week, it's 3 meals a day that we serve our senior residents. And people are tired, people are fatigued, and they also have families that they need to feed. So it's a challenge. I don't think we're going to come out with magic bullets here today, but I think as you hear our stories, maybe you can take a nugget or two and pass it on. So thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you for sharing that story, and thank you for all that you're doing for the seniors. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, Taya, how about a little background from you? Tell us a story.
Right. I think that Zita set me up and Connie very well. And so I serve as the Chief Innovation Officer at Morehouse School of Medicine for the last 5 months. So prior to that, when the pandemic started, I was the first African-American vice chair at Gilling School of Global Public Health. So let that resonate. This is a public health engine that's known for the work that they do and $1 billion of research that comes out of that. And so my career actually started about 25 plus years ago in academia. So I've worked at various different academic health centers, but I'm working at Morehouse School of Medicine, and we are known as the health equity movement or the engine. And so what does that mean? It has been probably the sexiest topic that you've heard about during the pandemic. And the pandemic for me allowed me to realize that I was created for a purpose. Not that I didn't know that, but I recognized that I was born during the civil rights movement. And I recall my mother dropping a plate, and what happened? Martin Luther King was just assassinated. Why am I talking about that? Because it raised the awareness of why my mother said that there was a pathway for success that I needed to follow. And then another one of my mentors that has never spoken to me, but she wrote the book, It's Up to the Woman. And it talks about our differences and the way we activate. And so during the pandemic, I lost 4 key major family members. We lost my mother-in-law, July 19th, 2020, father-in-law, June 19th, 2020. And so it was a ripple effect. And so for me, again, it resonated that I was being created for this moment, not the great resignation, but it was a great recognition for me to know that I was created for a purpose. And that meant me being kind, me also being adaptable, but understanding that there were people that were out there that were suffering. And so what I saw with the health equity movement and during the pandemic is that there were a lot of isms that were highlighted: classism, sexism, racism. And so here we are with people really identifying with their purpose. And so people have made those declarations, is that maybe I don't want to work in a company or an institution that really doesn't identify with where I was purposed to be. And I think that that's what I see out of this movement, is that there was a call from leadership to understand that what matters right now is being attentive to the needs of people that we serve. And so I'll leave it at that. There's a lot that I could say, but I think that during this moment, what really resonated with me was being born during a movement and being active in a movement to help raise the level of awareness of what women are now seeing during this moment and what we're seeing during the pandemic.
Thank you so much. Very, very moving. It reminds me of Esther in the Old Testament that says, you were born for such a time as this. And I believe all 3 of you are living through that. And we're so fortunate to have you in the world and so fortunate to have you a part of WBC. You know, I want to build on what Taya was saying around purpose. You know, we know from research that women work for organizations that have a purpose. Not that men don't, but women are really gravitated toward that. When they begin to look at where do I want to go to work, they think about the purpose of the organization, and then they think about the culture, and then they think about the role and the compensation. I would be curious on if that's your findings and maybe what your organizations are doing to bring the purpose of the organization forward.
Yeah, I'll be happy to tee that off if you'd like, Deb.
Thank you.
I think, and it's really an interesting question, because when I look at my career that I've had with these corporate healthcare tech companies, you know, there's been some great ones and there's been some not so great. And I think that's how everybody, when you experience your career path, you're going to hit a few bumps in the road and you got to figure out how you work forward from that. But what I can say is even the ones that I did not care for the culture, or I had some of the greatest challenges, what I walked away with that helped me learn and apply what to do better and how to do things different, that was just invaluable to me. Okay. And what I found, it was a building block approach as I went through my career and what was going on. But I think one of the things that I would say too is when you think about the purpose, I still, just when you think you've got it all figured out, all of a sudden something comes sideways, you go, wow, I thought I was meant to go this way. But I think there's still a lot left. And women that have got this much history and this much experience, I don't really know what my purpose will be yet. I love your story, Taya. Love that. I've got similar backgrounds and growing up in Alabama that we've had to come so far and just had a very strong spiritual foundation and values in my family. But I also look and go, what is the next thing? And I look at, if you think about what we're working in, where we've been, where we've come from, we came up in a traditional economy. Mm-hmm. We are now converging the digital and the traditional economy. So, while you've got a lot of the new younger professionals coming out of college, they don't have that background. They don't have that experience. That's things we have to help them with and work through a lot of those areas with them. But I do think that that's a big that's a big part of our purpose and where we've come from, ladies, and how it is now up to us to reach back and help and give some of that insight to the younger generations and that are coming up, because what we have been able to see in our lifetime is transformational. And now going into this whole digital economy, as we have the last 3 to 4 years, it's only going to continue to accelerate. And one of the things I'll end on is we are now moving to the gig economy, if you haven't
That's
heard
right.
that.
That's
The
right.
gig economy is where people have work dropped out and they have stepped away from the workforce. They are now individual contractors. They aren't going to go back to work full time for people. If there's anything that came out of the pandemic, it was the awareness and greater clarity of what I want to do with my life, how I want my life to look, the balance I want. The gig economy really popped up. And let me tell you, it is on full acceleration because we are in the digital side of this, and people can figure out what they want to do at their own pace, at their own time. And they can work part-time, they can work full-time, or decide, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm going to go to the next thing. So I just wanted to put that in there. I think we're going to continue to see a lot more transformation over the next few years. And it's exciting. It's very exciting.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Zita, what you might say about that, given that you have, individuals that have to be on property, right? For, in delivering these meals and caring for the seniors. I'm wondering how that what Connie talked about might impact your organization.
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone working in senior living has a purpose of taking care of the older adults, and it's obviously personal. We all have, older parents or friends, et cetera. And I think, certainly with Sodexo, the mission statement is really about providing quality of life, and we provide quality of life through serving. And predominantly it's through food, and everyone loves food, needs food to stay nourished. And I think kind of grounding ourselves in that over these last 2+ years of what, in the midst of all of this craziness, what can we ground ourselves in? And the purpose is really to provide quality of life. Credit to many of my team members who are in these senior living communities. Just imagine they're in lockdown for at least 8-9 months in 2020, 2021 in their rooms. We are serving, delivering food. How do you create an experience? How do you bring to life some energy? Because you may be the only people that they're going to see for the day. And just to be able to provide some of those, when Easter came, having Easter eggs that you're serving, or everyone kind of opened their doors and they did bingo, from down the hall. So just speaking to the resiliency of the people working that day to day, and how they're really trying to brighten someone's day, even if it's a note on a tray or a greeting. We actually did a letter writing campaign. I'm a board member of Girl Scouts, and once again, just trying to connect, have that personal connection that can feed the energy for our seniors. So I think everything is grounded in purpose. I know that's why I came to Sodexo, somewhat a company that would match my mission, my values. And I think I learned that over my career, that I am best served and I bring out my best when my values match with a company's mission.
Mm-hmm. And Zita,
Yeah, I just want to say,
I was just going to ask if, would you share your values?
yeah.
So it is all about people. It is all about taking care of people and people taking care of each other. As I've switched different careers, people would always ask me, okay, oil and gas, coffee, seniors, but it's all about the people. For me, it's then how do you impact How do you make something better? What can be improved? How do we take care of one another? So it's a lot of those softer skills that I look for. And, Sodexo's mission of, providing quality of life. It's a lot of the giving to be better, to make things better that comes through people.
Thank you.
Deb,
And
do you
then
mind if I
Connie, cut you
interject?
off.
Can I interject just one quick second?
Yeah.
I just want to say to Zeta, my 91-year-old stepfather is in a home right now in rehab, and he's been there 3 months. He's got 1 more month. I cannot tell you, if you want to see the difference you can make in someone's life, what you are doing, you and your team, that's what I see. I go in there and I visit and I experience everything you just talked about with him. And, some days it's just hopelessness at times. And just a little things like bringing Krispy Kreme donuts for everybody that just brightens their day, that someone cares. So thank you. I mean, it's meant a lot to go through that journey and see how hard that is for people that are, be in rehab or in assisted living. It's very tough. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Good.
Thank
Let me go
you.
to Taya next with maybe a different question. And this is around, has Morehouse put into practice any new things that might help with the retention of women? So kind of going now into the best practices, and then we'll go to Zita and Connie as well.
Absolutely. And just to pick up, you never know in life what you're going to have to face. And so 2016, the quality of life of my father was compromised. And again, I'm coming from a single parent home where my mother raised 3 girls. I'm his caregiver in 2016. And so just recently, the lift of being able to see him because they were shut down. So it's in alignment with Morehouse School of Medicine. Our mission is leading the creation and advancement of health equity. That's a bold mission. And so when you talk about what we've done in the past, we're a community participatory organization. We help diversify the healthcare workforce. When you look at the number of Black physicians that serve communities, 1 out of 10 is a person of color. And in that person is probably managing probably 4-fold or 10-fold patients than that other healthcare provider. So what Morehouse School of Medicine has done, even before the pandemic, is put in wellness checks for students. That was in 2019 before I left. And it's just like your routine visit, but it's 3 times a year, because we saw how wellness and the well-being of students were being compromised during the Black Lives Matters movement. And then with the pandemic, it's just exploded. And so what we've recognized is now we need to work on stabilizing those folks that are teaching the students and who are doing the administrative work for students. And so we're looking at programs that help people create and ideate, because oftentimes we may sit at the table, but there are other people that should be at the table. And so what resonates with me, what we're doing, is that we're increasing the number of wellness opportunities for our staff members as well as faculty members, because, let's face it, there's a shortage of physicians. And when you talk about the number of Black and Brown physicians, that number is even smaller. So how can we, expand that pipeline? And so we're, looking at resources and really asking people, how do you feel about Morehouse School of Medicine? You talked about the gig economy. People are being able to decide, do they even want to work for you? And is there a quality of life for them, or work-life flexibility is what I call it. So we're doing quite a bit, and we're, in the stages of, again, there's no silver bullet, but we're trying to see what works by listening to the community and listening to our faculty and staff.
Zita or Connie?
Go ahead, Connie.
So when I think about what Taya just said, I think there's a couple things. When we look at from a corporate perspective, some of the changes that we saw was the well-being in our people. And of course, that's when they really hit the workforce shortage full front. Everybody exiting, it's like, how are we going to keep everybody? How are we going to retain our workforce? And then of course, well-being was at the forefront. It's not that corporate America never had well-being as a component of the benefit, but now all of a sudden with the pandemic, it was at the top, okay? What we did, some of the changes that we did that really worked, we did have some bad actors though, is we offered a 90-day leave of absence with pay if your children were at home and out of school, that allowed you to step away and take care of your kids for 90 days. And that was with pay. That was not long-term or short-term disability or Family Leave Act. It was the exception, and they allowed that. Most everybody stayed within the guidelines and did the right thing, and they were taking care of the kids. Of course, you have a bad actor. We had one, I have to share this. We had one bad actor, and he went and took another job and was working another job while pulling compensation and supposed to be home and working for Microsoft. So anyway, I think there's some lessons learned, how we got to make sure we get the protocol, the guardrails, the guidelines a little bit stickier in there. But overall, I mean, the well-being was good, more collaboration, because you had a workforce that's, you know, all hybrid. Every office was shut down. And how do you stay in touch with those people and find out how they're doing? And that was tough. And that was tough on the leaders to have to do that, because it was a constant making sure everybody was doing well. So that was one of the things that, you know, we had to do a lot of. So.
Yeah, I think, you know, many companies are learning as they go here. And I think most will admit that they've had to update their policies. And I think it's almost kind of eye-opening of how outdated some of these policies have been around benefits, specifically with women, from maternity leave and paternity leave. And
Yes.
so I think Sodexo was no different. I think that there were some out-of-date policies that were updated because of, you know, the outcomes now around the pandemic, and certainly with women. And I think just trying to improve the quality of life for everyone during this time. So I don't think it's anything, there's some magic bullet out there that, hey, we introduced something that, you know, no one else has. I think it's been eye-opening though, that we had you know, some out-of-date policies. So the pandemic has proven to be obviously very, very challenging, but there's been some really good work that has come out of it that I think can set ourselves up better for the future.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know about you all. We have really adopted a MSM, Morehouse School of Medicine Flex Works policy. So being a little bit more flexible,
Yeah.
optimizing space. We
Yeah.
realize for some of those traditional setting folks that are, you know, so you have every generation working now, from a baby boomer to even the Gen Zs. And so we recognize that we needed to digitize some of our practices. And so our online learning has been explosive. And so now we're looking at opportunities for tuition remission for employees and other creative things. We have this COVID network that was created with KPMG. And so there's partnerships that we've created to learn, you know, how do we build the right type of program for people to feel that health equity does look at me from a personal perspective, because it's really not, you know, doing it at a level where one size fits all. It really is looking at someone's optimal level of health and their well-being. And so we've put a lot of that in practice, and stabilizing folks to know that you can trust coming into Morehouse School of Medicine. Either you're going to be vaccinated and boosted, so 96% of the folks are vaxxed and boosted, and then we have had a less than 1% COVID rate, and so that was unheard of. But again, leadership matters, and then the context matters of you really looking at and saying what your value systems look like, and then what the intrinsic values are for each generation that you're serving, because they're different, and we have to face that.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Taya, and of course others, in terms of You're talking about updating practices that better meet the needs of women and men. And then, in addition to that, we also know that the culture is really important. We kind of started our discussion around purpose. And I'm wondering what you all might be doing to support and develop leaders, because leaders create culture. And so I'd be curious on perhaps some things that you might be doing that are new and different, that where leaders now are really in tune with how they have to lead differently.
Absolutely. So we have this thing called the Jedi Experience. So it's justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So everyone's working on their whole DEI model, but we call it the Jedi because a lot of times people forget about justice, because with justice and with health equity, if there's no policy that's born out of this difficulty or this pandemic to raise the awareness and to help people have access to care and health care, then we're not really doing what we need to do, right? It's not compassionate and servant leadership. So one of the things that we're looking at from a leadership perspective is the Intrapreneur Program. And it's looking at building people from the inside out. Great people know that we are the health equity champion and thought leader, but what are your folks saying about you and how can they commit to this? So we're looking at a transformation of how we employ leaders, as well as our evaluation and performance process. It's a little bit more stringent. We're looking at accountability, administrative relative value units. So the compensation piece, the parity and the equity around what that looks like, but how do we make sure that leaders at the top are accountable for the people that they serve? And people will perform well when they feel like they have a voice and that they can create and ideate and they have a seat at the table. So that's one of the programs that we're working on through this whole Jedi Experience. Why would Morehouse School of Medicine, a historically Black school, have this Jedi Experience? Because we recognize that diversity is ableness, it's women, it's all sorts of things sometimes that we overlook. We've seen how the Asian community has experienced racism in other communities. And so again, what we're trying to do is uplift our leaders so that they can be better lead and provide opportunities. We've updated our succession planning pieces. So we're in the process of looking at succession planning, not like corporations, but making it a little bit more tempered towards what does this mean in a world where there's academic freedom. So still a work in progress. We'd love to hear what others are doing, but we felt like just having a space for staff and having training and opportunities for them is really important. People are building new skill sets, and our faculty do a great job of serving cognitively diverse leaders. So how do we help our staff members understand really what that means and how the quality of their experience can be infused in that process?
All right, thank you.
Hey, if I could just add on to that. One thing not to be understated here is development. And so just listening to you and what that looks like or feels like to the recipient is about, you care about me and my development. Mm-hmm. And I think, Dr. Deborah, to that point of, leadership and creating that culture, development to me has really actually been kind of the magic bullet around retention. And certainly within this pandemic and all of the short staff, et cetera, we've really instituted what we call a 2+2 conversations, which is you don't wait until the end of the year to have a conversation about your future. We want to have actually ongoing conversations, and we'll talk about your top 2 strengths, your top 2 opportunities. What do you aspire to be, and how do we get you there? And we do have those conversations throughout the year to just make sure, hey, make you feel like you are part of something bigger. We have that, whether you're working in unit at a community or whether you're an SVP or a CEO, that you will have these conversations. But I think there's something around just feeling like, okay, you see me, I'm not just doing a job, this is part of something bigger, and I can develop into being something better.
I love that. Connie?
Yeah, no, I have to agree with these two women on a couple of key points. One is to Zita's point, we incorporated multiple touch points throughout the year for the career development, leadership development, and also how are you doing type conversations, because
Check-ins.
initially it was beginning of the year, mid-year, and the end of the year it was over. You had either hit your numbers, performed, done all your metrics. And then we realized during the pandemic, we had to have more touch points for the development side as leaders and helping to develop our leaders. I also saw that we really became a more empathetic company all the way around. If you think about it, I think companies did shift to become more empathetic about their employees because they didn't realize what they were going through, many of the employees in their home situations and all the challenges as caregivers, elderly parents, little small children, learning disabled kids, you name it, especially when you look at the events that took place during the pandemic, okay? It was a lot of turmoil in a lot of people's lives. But one of the things I can say is that I love what I'm seeing is also flex time, and you touched on this, Taya. But the flex time that everybody is now getting, I don't know about some of the others, but I see corporate America is shifting to, rather than tracking your time 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because you only been here 3 years. If you need the time off, take the time off. If you're not performing, it's going to be reflected in your work. Okay. So I'm glad to see corporate America finally has embraced of, it's not about you can only take 2 weeks off and here's 10 days for personal leave and sick leave. It's if you need the time off, just take the time. And there are a few major corporations out there, they don't even have a time off schedule. While we have one, the leadership with under Michael Dell, it's if you need time off, you take the time. Okay. And Michael Dell with Dell Technologies, he just drives an excellent culture, which is one reason I came back in to work with the leadership team I started my career in. And I'm not sure I would have come back. I had opportunities, but I loved the culture. And I worked at Dell 6 years in the early 2000 era. And now I came back and I plan on my career there. So, I think that's really important. It speaks volumes about him and what he's done with that company.
That's wonderful. It's hard to believe, but we only have a few minutes left. So I'm going to ask each of you if you will just share some encouragement or something that's inspiration, in addition to what you've already shared, which has been amazing. But maybe just a few minutes on each of you, just going to share that inspiration.
I'll jump in.
Go for it.
So I met with our president and CEO, Dr. Valerie Montgomery Rice, yesterday, and I noticed on her desk, it said, I had superpowers, but my therapist took them away. And I was thinking about this meeting and this conversation, and you know what? It's okay not to be okay. We have high pressure jobs, and we have to recognize that there are high functioning people that work with us on a day-to-day basis. A lot of them could be depressed and stressed out. But I think what's important is that we have to own what we are as leaders. If you're a servant leader or a compassion leader, and that's what I've learned to do with all of what I've experienced, is to infuse more personal time and focused time in my schedule. I carve out focused time in my schedule. I have this exercise well-being regimen now. And I think that that is something that we need to, whatever that is for you, is that you do need to do your own types of wellness checks and check with your people, but also make certain that they're building time in their schedules, because that's important to have that focus and that mental time, and recognize that many people, again, who don't want to work, they don't have to work with you, but if they're valued, what value can you bring to them on a day-to-day basis? And that's so simple. It sounds so simple, but what resonates are the values that we uphold and we share. And I think that that's the common ground that we need to find with folks that work with us, is what do we share in our values, and how can we get to this quality of life, but also still remain productive in the jobs that we do on a day-to-day basis. And it's really about service. Like Zita said, it's serving people and having a heart for people and making certain that people are really okay.
Thank you. Zita, how about you?
Yeah, there's a lot there. You know, at the end of the day, I think about what, you know, on an airplane and the flight attendant is like, put your mask on first before you put your mask on your child. It's taking care of yourself so that you can take care of others. And I found myself having that conversation with several people over the last 2 years of, are you taking care of you? Because it seems like you're so busy trying to take care of everyone else. And so to me, I've got to role model that. You know, I work a lot of hours, but I do have a set time that is family time. I do have a set time that I watch my reality shows. I do have a set time that I take my dance class, and I can then show up to be my best self because I've kind of, you know, cleared that out. And so if I were to advise people, it would just be, you got to take care of yourself first. And so many people are so busy taking care of everybody else that they don't stop and take time for themselves. We spent a lot of time, certainly over the first year, but now even more importantly is, you know, the EAP that most companies have. Ours is called LifeWorks. They are phenomenal. It's a phenomenal service that has so many different resources to it, from finding babysitters to mental health to therapy to what have you. And I think it's an understated benefit that many companies have. We've continued to emphasize the LifeWorks piece to that, because that will involve anybody within the company. And so I would just say, hey, it's about self-care so that you could care for others.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, Connie.
You know, I have to agree with these two ladies on a couple of different points. One, Zita, I could not be more aligned with you. I have always been a firm believer, the balance, your personal balance determines your success and how you impact others, your mind. So I'm really big on the spiritual, physical, emotional balance. And I try to practice that every morning before the day begins. And if not, I will make sure I fit some component of those three things somewhere within the day. But the spiritual side and having that me time in the morning and physical activity, that's really a lot of my DNA. So when I miss that, it impacts me. So, you know, that's the one thing. And then every day, you know, you talked about when I stepped away, stepped forward, stepped back, whatever I did, I really put guardrails around going back into the workplace, what I want to do, and put the guardrails of, I'm not going to work 12-hour days anymore. It better be on a project that's got to be a deliverable due the next day. But I put those guardrails in place around my life, how I'm blessing others and making sure that I'm taking care of others. And I hope that having a positive impact on others on a daily basis. That is my goal. That's what I want to do.
Thank you, Connie. And you certainly do that. Thank you so much, ladies. I'm going to turn over to Gwen in just a second. I do want to close with a quote that came to me as you ladies were talking. And this was a quote by Peyton Manning. And it says, the most MVP is the one that makes other players feel valued.
Yeah.
So, and that's what you all have done for us today. So Gwen, give it to you to wrap up.
Thank you, Deb. And that's the perfect actually kind of mantra for the Women Business Collaborative, as we're both a collaborative and a movement. And you ladies and everyone who's participated across these tracks have really supported each other with this messages, with this experience, and with the work that we're all doing. So thank you, Deb, Connie, Zeta, and Taya. This is wonderful. For the audience, we're closing this back and we're going to go into the closing remarks in 4 minutes to hear what we've learned today, who we've heard from. And so we'll see you shortly in the main auditorium. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for attending.